So my talk is about making big games after I'd gotten used to making small games. So a couple of years ago, I went to one of Petri's talks at GDC, and he inspired me to do small games. And so I went home and I did small games for 6 months. And this is sort of me talking about what I did afterwards. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Michael Todd. Some of you know what I look like without my pants on now. So, and that's my website. I did Broken Brothers, which as you can see is red and also black. It's pretty much its distinctive thing. And Silent Skies, which was a Gamma winner. So big games have different rules, different expectations. I switched from small games into big games, and I thought it was sort of the same, only bigger, but there are distinctly different goals when you're building them. So the three big ones are: people expect more if they have to pay. This is not as true as you'd think, but it does exist, and certainly people on forums like hold this opinion. The big portals require a better game than I would give up for free. Again, this is not as true as you might think, but it is a definite goal you need to keep in mind. And ideas for big games need to be much stronger and deeper, and this is something I have found. Some of my games in a week games tend to run dry before they reach the 2 hours of gameplay that I intended to do. Right, so the thing is, I started thinking about this and I was like, oh my god, the game needs to be perfect in comparison to my... Yes, cactus. So my head exploded. I totally stressed out. I made one game and then I was so deeply into having to make it perfect, it was of course impossible to make it perfect. And boom. Stuff started to not look fun. I'd show it to other people. They would get addicted to it and play it for 20 minutes, and I couldn't drag them away, but it wouldn't be fun to me because I was overthinking it to the point of hating it. I was putting way too much pressure on things. However, I discovered that there was a park next to my house, and that helped a lot. Work stopped being as rewarding. I was used to making games in a week. I was used to releasing 2 or 3 games in a month. I used to get feedback. People used to say, oh, hey, I played your latest game. I like it. I don't like it. You should change this. And there's a rewarding feeling to finishing the game. I learned something from Jonathan about making lists, and I came up with a better way than just adding stuff to a list whenever I thought of it, and then slowly, during my workday, grinding away at the list. I would go somewhere I liked and brainstorm a bunch of stuff I wanted to add that day. And then I'd go home, I'd add as much of it as I did, and then I'd throw the rest out. And the next day I would brainstorm completely different things. I do make lists now, but not anywhere near as much. Okay, so this is just some of the things I found when I was working on small games and shifted over to big games. I think we've all made, well, I mean, everybody in this room has just made a small game, but a lot of people take their small games and then they disappear for a bit and they come back with a big version. This sometimes works, this sometimes has problems. In my personal experience, I've done 2 significant small games that I've then gone and worked on for at least a couple of months each. And what I found was stretching the idea really, it didn't end well in either case. On the other hand, designing a new idea from the original concepts, from what you came up with for your game in a week, can lead to a really, really good game that still uses the things that were cool in the small game. One specific example of this is I made a small game that was fun. It was Silent Skies, and it had no interface. And I tried to make a bigger version, a much bigger version, that again had no interface. But complexity ends up requiring interface quite a bit more. So one of the things I would advise when you're thinking about scale is trying to make sure you're not trying to do 2 things that are mutually incompatible, which can happen when you try and stretch a game up because you designed the initial set of rules when you weren't thinking about making this big game. Yeah, reverse feature creep. everybody knows what feature creep is. I started overthinking things to the point where I wouldn't add them. I would think about them and then say, all right, I'll see if they look good tomorrow, and they didn't look as appetizing tomorrow, and then I would not add anywhere near as many features or content or monsters as I really should have. So I did find that it was quite useful to go on binges and just add stuff, add tons and tons of stuff, and then edit it out afterwards, because you're not thinking about it and it just flows out naturally. And if you're a creative person, you get into a mood where there's no such thing as writer's block, and you make a ton of really cool things, and then you'd be surprised how many of them are actually really good afterwards. I talked about the feedback before. 2 things I did to get to fake feedback is to demo my games at conferences, Comic Cons, indie get-togethers, whatever, and to get a small group of playtesters who you warn ahead of time that you are going to send them all sorts of stuff, and they're going to play it, and they're going to yell at you. A specific example of I made Broken Brothers, which was a game I made in 8 days, and Valve liked it, and I said, all right, I'm going to make a big version now. For sale on Steam, I'm going to be a multi-billionaire. And I set out making this huge list of things to improve. And what the list should have been is, the important things. And what it was 100 things that really didn't matter. I wanted to improve my pathfinding method so it was a little bit cleaner. I wanted to have the units to target in different ways based on the unit instead of just all using one way. And nobody noticed. Nobody cared. So months later, I sort of really had it pounded into my head that when you make a big game out of a small game, or a big game out of anything, an idea, you need to keep what's actually important in the front. And this may sound obvious, but as soon as I finished a small game and started working on the big one, I started pulling out this list of all this stuff that I'd wanted to do but couldn't, instead of keeping what was really important at the forefront. Getting lost in the void. This is one of the things I run into sometimes, is I set up my game in such a way that I can design anything. I have lots of flexibility. If I want to put in a mini game, I can. If I want to change the gameplay, I can. And then the problem is I can do anything, so I do absolutely nothing. So I have purposely been putting in limits. There are a couple of really good example games, but if you specifically limit yourself where you can put your... It helps to keep your goals in mind, but basically limits channel you as you design content. So a single set of controls or a single simple gameplay that can be iterated on, those are very useful. A specific time limit or size limit for levels is also really good, because you find that you're not worried about the overall problem, because in a very open game, every level you're having to take on, what is this game? What am I doing for this level? Whereas in a very limited setting, you're just interested in how can I make this bouncy thing fun in a new or interesting way. So specifically this, if you choose